David, thank you so much for taking the time to have a chat with me.
I'm really excited about it.
So I remember how we first met at DWeb Camp back in, I think it was August. I'm curious what you remember about our first meeting and then how we've gotten to know each other.
We were at DWeb Camp, which was my first time there. It was really interesting for me to try to navigate that space, and I had expected more people to be interested in Web3 than it actually turned out to be. So I found myself walking around, interacting with people, talking about what I'm doing, and also at the same time, I was talking a different language from many of the people there. And I remember being up in the cafeteria room, which wasn't being used as a cafeteria, but had been repurposed for meetings. And I was talking to a young guy. I can't remember his name. He was super enthusiastic about everything and talking really, really loudly and with his hands and his body. And somehow I think you were standing relatively close to us. You started hearing some of the things that we were talking about, partially because he was so loud and also because I was expressing myself as well. And somehow you kind of stepped one foot closer, and maybe we stepped a couple feet closer to you, and we started talking. And he started dominating the conversation, but then you and I started really connecting and said, "Oh, okay, there's something here. Let's connect." That was my recollection of the beginning.
I remember that well. You said two words that made my ears perk up. I was hanging out in Hacker Hall, which is how they had termed it. As you said, they converted the cafeteria into a spot with tables, chairs, and a whole lot of power strips where folks could come in and hook up their machines. And I'm sitting there and I hear the two words. The first one was holochain. The second one was Noster. And although for me, those two things exist in my world, they're not something that I see or hear about coming together in the wild terribly often. And so that really piqued my interest. I closed my computer, and you're right, I just came and just wanted to listen in. And one of the gifts that DWeb Camp gives participants is an approach to sort of permissionless conversation joining. You don't need anyone's permission to join a conversation. I love that about DWeb Camp because I find so many other spaces are policed and permissioned, and so many more wonderful things happen when we intentionally invite collaboration, cooperation, and connection. So it was really neat to hear you talking about both Noster and Holochain. And I said, I'm doing stuff in both of those spaces. Tell me more. And then it just sort of blossomed from there. And you have been so incredibly generous in sharing not just your knowledge, experience, your views, the work you've done before, but also your relationships. And one of the highlights for me was joining one of the initial calls that you held around the Meta Layer project, and we'll get into what that is. And the people who came, you are a Pied Piper. You attract all sorts of folks to you who are excited and on fire about what you're working on. And it's your energy. It's this inclusive energy. It's this excited energy. You are so passionate about really improving the world by making our information layer, by making the web better, that it's really hard to not be enthusiastic alongside you. So that's what I remember, very similar to you. And I've just really loved getting to know you and getting to, continuing to get to know you.
Same. Absolutely. And I remember, when I mentioned Noster and Holochain at that point, on that day was probably the first time that I'd actually talked about both those things at the same time. I have this view that our data in the future will be our biggest or most important asset, our most valuable asset, more valuable than your home, than your car, etc. And the reason I say that, I actually think that our data ultimately, if used correctly, could be much, much more valuable to us personally than it is valuable to corporations to try to get us to buy a new, brand of ketchup or to buy a specific model of a car. That's what they're using it for, right? Like they're optimizing the marketing messages and targeting us with our data to try to make us want to buy specific things that they're advocating for. But I think our data could be used to help us guide our path and avoid making the same mistakes over and over and figure out what we're here for, how to move in the direction to get us there, and how to alter that course as things change over time. I believe that if we were to gain possession of our data and be able to have it all in a data vault, I can imagine graphs that look like stock charts. They go up and down for our health. and and for our AI to be monitoring those, and if it goes to a certain level, you're getting a message saying, "Hey, we're noticing that you're not sleeping the same, and here's some potential interventions that you may do," and just an ongoing basis, really looking at what we're doing and making sure that we're at least doing the things that are in alignment with where we have intentionally set our destination to be, as well as we know.
And it makes me curious how you first got inspired to work on these problems.
In the 2000s, working on localization, so that's local energy, local food, local water, local economies. And that led me to be in a lot of conversations with different people who were so-called experts. The interesting thing that I kept on hearing was, we have all the information we need, we just don't have the collective will to do it. And this didn't matter who I was talking to. It just kept on coming up and coming up. And that made me think, well, Google says that they've organized all the data, but maybe they haven't done as great a job as they think they have. Because if they had done a great job of organizing all the data, then the collective response would basically be the things that we need to do. And everyone is saying, all these experts are saying, we're not doing what we should do, despite the fact that the data exists. So there's a disconnect there. And I said, well, what could we do to improve our decision-making capabilities? And I set that as really my initial goal. I want to make it so that we can make better collective decisions. And I found out about this thing called the Trivium, which is from ancient Greece, but I think that's when it was first recorded. But the Trivium is a 3-layered pyramid. The top, you have wisdom. The middle, you have understanding. And the bottom, you have knowledge. What I take away from the Trivium is you can't come to reliably wise decisions without having a strong understanding. And you can't have a strong understanding of things without having a very reliable knowledge base. So I looked at our knowledge base, which is the internet. I mean, obviously there's some things that are not online that you can also consider, but I was focused mainly on the internet because that's what we all have access to. And I asked myself, well, how good a knowledge base is the internet? And some people might say it's great because there's so much amazing information. But what I said was, it's actually horrible because it's a lot of great information mixed with really bad information, and it's extremely difficult to distinguish the two. It's a very low signal to noise information store, basically. And I actually, I don't know if it's true, but I said it's about as bad as it could be. It's the worst knowledge base for a computationally intensive society that we could potentially have. I just put it this way, we have so much potential to make it much, much better. And I started thinking, well, how could we do that? Well, we need to connect the information. That's the problem. The information is in silos. And when you have information in silos, then you're not able to see the context of things. You have the information here, but you can't see all the other things that are related to it. That's what we need to make better decisions. I mean, information without context it's not knowledge. It's just a tidbit that doesn't really allow application because the context is what enables us to contextualize things so that we can actually bring them into a decision-making process. So I said to myself, well, what can we do to connect information? And by the way, in the back of this was my experience with indigenous or original people culture that said that relationship is everything, that it's all my relations. Everything is connected. And that is true. And it's the same thing with information, context. So I started thinking about, well, how do we connect information? What's the best way to do that? And I recognize that links is a way to do it. And we do that on the internet. Although by 2014, 2015, we were already starting to not use links as much. And what I realized, some of the downsides of links were, one, they're completely controlled by the page author. So they only exist if the web page author thinks that there's a good reason to put a link there. And like I was saying, that was getting diminished by commercial sites already. And then the link is a one-way thing. It links from here to there. Generally, it just goes to a page. So there are a lot of issues with that in my mind. And it's, first of all, anybody should be able to link information. I mean, if we're going to truly connect information, there's no way that we can rely upon the page author. I mean, that's ridiculous. And then secondly, I mean, links need to be two-way. Come on, if you're going to link two things, to link it one way, it just doesn't really make sense. And by the way, Ted Nelson in the 1960s, the guy who came up with hypertext, he was working on a system called Xanadu that was bidirectional links. That's where I started.
Everything you just said and how you just said it is exactly what I was drawn to when we first met. It's your passion, your care, the research you've clearly done. When I hear you describing the firmament of human knowledge as expressed on the web, which lives on the internet, what I think of is stars. And I think about how when you look up in the sky, so when we were at DWeb camp, there was a wonderful evening activity where we hiked up to the top of the hill, and one of our colleagues who loves astronomy gave a talk about the stars and the constellations that we were looking at. And because of where we were, pretty far from most big cities, we had an incredible view of the stars. And it makes me think about how, depending on your positionality and whatever else you're around, the noise can drown out the stars. So when you're in a big city, you're more likely to see airplane lights than you are to see stars. When you're out in the middle of the ocean with nothing around you, the sky is nothing but stars. And I think about how in the course of human history, human beings in different parts of the world have looked up at the stars. Our urge to practice hermeneutics, to make sense of things, to create stories from what we see, is one of our greatest strengths as humans. And I think about how people have for millennia looked up at the stars and connected those dots to create stories from them. And they make constellations. And then those constellations have relationships with one another because they are part of how we tell our stories. And what the internet and really what the web, the information layer that lives on top of these interconnected computers, what that has given us is the ability to put out all of our stars and then connect them in new and different ways to create new stories and share those stories with each other. And one of the challenges that I see around the rush to centralize systems, which is what's happened over the last 20 years, is that it limits the stories. And it decides based on power and influence and capital, which stories are true and which stories are false, which stories will be amplified and which stories will be silenced. And it makes us believe that we cannot create new stories, nor can our stories be ours. And what I love about where we are going is that we now truly have a sky full of stars. And we are giving people the ability to see all of those stars and the power to realize their own agency in connecting those dots and telling those stories and sharing them. And I am fascinated with how you are able to connect the technological aspect of this, right? Because this is a lot of ones and zeros, but to make it human, because the web is human. It is our closest repository of human knowledge. And as you said, not everything lives on the web, and that's good. And the web is a way that people can access knowledge. And one of the reasons why it is so important for us to resist unending centralization is that it makes it easier for knowledge to be limited. It makes it easier for a dictator to decide that they are going to shut off access to the web for people who live within their state or nation. And all of a sudden, the stars go out and people are in darkness. And what we want to do is create systems that are immune to that type of overreach so that people can see the stars, they can connect the dots, they can tell their stories, they can learn from the stories of others. And that to me is why this work has never been more important than right now. And so I'm really grateful for all of the effort that you are expending to connect the dots and to bring people together who are passionate about this and those who are curious and may not yet know that this will unlock something that they're passionate about.
Thank you. Thank you, first of all. I don't think people realize how many times across the world that the internet gets shut down. Over 100 times in the last year, a government has shut down the internet, but it happens relatively frequently. I mean, much too frequently. I mean, just imagine that, to be cut off the internet. You can't see the stars anymore. That constellation metaphor just rings so true for me, by the way. It's in my book, in the MetaWeb, the next level of the internet, which got published in late 2023. We have a picture and it's of the night sky with just some little dots. And then next to it, you have one that shows the constellation Orion. And I see that as this work. The connecting the dots work is like you said, it's allowing us to create the context for things, and it's how we make meaning. You know, if you're just looking at the dots of the stars, but you don't have the connections of them, you'll never see the constellations. And, you know, obviously people saw the constellation lines in their minds initially, but then when they wanted to transmit them to other people, they drew them out. And that's what allowed other people to see what they saw, which became a shared reality. Shared reality is what we don't really have right now, because we have the dots of the internet. When they're not shut off, we do have them. But like you said, there's a lot of noise. So there's a lot of noise dots up there as well. We don't really have the connections because commercial sites aren't making the connections as much as they used to, because they want to keep you on their site for one of two reasons. One, they want to continue getting your data, extracting your data. And two, they want to just keep on showing you ads and keep you within their loop for the possibility that you're going to somehow can transact with them. So that's why, you know, I came up with this idea of a bridge, which is a conceptual link between a piece of content on one page to a piece of content on another page with a relationship. And the idea was that anybody could create a bridge.
One of the things that I am cognizant of in these conversations is that they don't necessarily feel accessible to people who don't think of themselves as technologists. And it's always funny to me because I wouldn't label myself particularly as a technologist, although recently somebody did in conversation. They introduced me that way and it sort of baffled me. What I think, though, is so important is that this work, what you're describing, the meta layer project, this is not solely the purview of tech companies and people who are coders and programmers. This is all of us. And I would love to hear you talk a bit more about how this project is accessible and how people who find this interesting, this piques your curiosity. How can they start to dip their toe in the water? How can they start to maybe get a telescope and look up at the night sky?
When I am asked who is this project for, I say it's for people who care about something, who want to make something happen in the world. They could be really interested in the internet and making a much better internet, but that's not really a requirement. I actually am more interested in talking to people who have something, some purpose behind their life, something that they want to make better in the world, some kind of cause that isn't necessarily something that everyone's into, but they are, and there's a whole group of people that are. And so what I wanted to do with the Meta Layer initiative is invite those people to tell us how the internet is stopping them from doing what they want to do now, or not supporting them in pushing forward their cause, and also for them to think about, well, if we were to have a better internet that really gave me agency, what what could we do that we're not doing right now?
I've seen the joke go around so many times that we now all have access to essentially the treasure trove of all human knowledge, and we use it to share cat videos.
Yeah.
Right now, who do you most want to be talking to?
Yeah, I want to be talking to people who have a this understanding within themselves that something isn't quite right with the digital world, and they have some notion, just like a starting point of where to start thinking about it. And what we've done is developed a chat GPT, a custom GPT is what they called it. And we've named it Bridget. And this custom GPT, if you go into it and say, I have this idea, even if it's just a germ of an idea, it'll help you work through how that can become a potential new feature on the next level of the internet. And then it will turn that into a submission, a formal submission to the Meta Layer initiative. Now, you will have to copy and paste it into the form because we're not quite there yet where it will be automatically submitted, but you could drop a link. I mean, we're encouraging people. I mean, even if it's something like, well, I was reading this article. This isn't my work, but I just loved what Tristan Harris or what Vint Cerf or what someone else said. I'm just going to take this link, put it in the submission assistant, because I think that this needs to be actually elevated to the point that it would be included in the next level of the internet. You put that in there, it could be turned into a submission in a minute. Like I said, it will help you generate an idea. You could, if you have a project already, you want to make sure that your project could actually benefit from the next level of the internet, where what I like to say is with this next level of the internet, what it can do is enable your project, what right now lives on a silo. It can enable it to be seen anywhere on the web that is relevant to the project. So if your project is about cats and dogs, then it could be seen on every site potentially that has any kind of a relationship to cats and dogs. So I would love people who just feel like okay, there's something. I read an article, I have a project, I just have an idea, to go in and work with our submission assistant, turn it into a submission. Because what we're going to do, we're going to take all those submissions. We have until June 30th, at least for this next round. We're going to take all those submissions and write an essay on we're going to write an essay on the desirable properties of a meta layer. We were challenged on September 16th. You were helping co-facilitate this meeting, the kickoff meeting with Vince Cerf, he challenged us to write an essay on the desirable properties of a meta layer. And we've done now two, or we're in the process of completing our second call for input, because we didn't think that we could do it ourselves. We wanted to get the input of everyone. We want the buy-in of everyone. We want this to work for everyone. So that's why we're putting it out there to get as much input as possible. So we're going to take all these inputs on the desirable properties, create this essay. We will then turn that set of inputs that are now, what we're saying are the codified, the desirable properties of a meta layer. Right now, we're up to 23. We're going to turn that into requirements that can then be built out as an application substrate that will enable anyone to build a overlay application or a smart tag or a meta community. So basically, these are new primitives for the meta layer. We'll basically create this development platform that makes it super easy for someone to just spin up something that really speaks to the need that they're trying to solve in the world. Yeah, that's what we're trying to do, and that's who we want to talk to.
It's inspiring. It's incredible. It's exciting to be part of. And you're right, being there on that call on September 16th with Vint and hearing the charge. I mean, we were given a charge, and then being able to bring others into that, bring them along, and have people have a true stake in the future of the web, have agency in this, recognize their agency in it. It's a really exciting time. And I am so glad that you are at the fore, encouraging and leading and driving, but being the ambassador for this work and the inspiration. Because in a world where we are right now can feel that there are not a lot of beacons for hope. It can feel like giving in to a fixed mindset makes sense. That where we are now, how things are is how they will be forever. And it's not true. And work like the Meta Layer Initiative, a spirit and an energy like yours, unlocks for people the understanding that things can be different and that there is hope and that there is reason to believe in a bright future. And I'm grateful for that. I'm excited for it. And as you well know, I'm here for it. So, David, thank you so much for this conversation, for your work, for being my friend. I'm so excited to see what's next. And hopefully people will check the show notes and they will go and contribute to the meta layer, because you don't have to know anything specific. You just need to know that you want things to be better.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me get the URL to the audience. So we have a place that anyone can go, anyone can contribute, and it's probably between you and I and your audience, it's probably going to continue. We're probably going to continue having call for input. So even if you're seeing this after June 30th, 2025, it's probably likely that you'll be able to go to http:// So that's your portal to providing your input on the next layer, the next level of the web. We're really excited to hear what everyone wants to see in the future so we can create the world that we want to live in.
And that's the note we end on. Thank you.
Thank you.